Hello, I'm Dr. Gloria Horsley.
And I'm her daughter, Dr. Heidi Horsley.
Heidi and I want to welcome you to Open to Hope Conversations, the podcast.
We believe that the greatest gift you can give yourself after a loss is hope, using this moment to connect with others who have not only survived but thrived.
So let's get started. Welcome to the Open to Hope Show. I'm your host, Dr. Gloria Horsley, with my daughter and co-host,
Dr. Heidi Horsley.
Well, Heidi, we have got a near and dear show today to us, and it's Death of a Child and Finding Meaning and Purpose, and we're going to have a great guest on. But before we start the show, I wanted to remind you all that my new book that I wrote with my partner, Dr. Frank Powers, is out now on Amazon, Open to Love, The Secrets of Senior Dating. And it's for all of you out there who have lost a partner and are again looking at love, because we know loneliness is one of the biggest problems in our country today. And Frank and I found each other on Silver Singles, and we wanted to share with you our story and the stories of the many clients that we both worked with over. Each of us has had a practice for 40 years. And we also wanted to tell you that 100% of the proceeds for this book go to the Open to Hope Foundation with the mission of helping people find hope after loss. Now, Heidi, you want to introduce our guest today? We're going to be talking about finding meaning and purpose after the death of a child.
I will, Mom, because he's got a phenomenal book out there, which we'll be talking about today. And like you said, we'll be talking about how do you find meaning and purpose after the death of a child. It is definitely a journey. And we are talking with Stephen Panus. He has been a publicist, a sports agent, artist, attorney, sports marketing executive, and a motivational speaker. His son, Jake, was a passenger in a reckless car accident and died at just 16 years old. He is the author of the groundbreaking book, Walk On. This book was selected by ABC TV's Good Morning America for its highly popular and selective Good Morning America Book Club. Welcome to our podcast, Stephen.
Well, thank you for having me, ladies. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's great to have you on. And we were talking about before we came on the show about the fact that I know that many of you know that my son and Heidi's brother Scott was killed 40 years ago in an automobile accident around the same age as your son.
And he was also the passenger.
Yeah, he was also the passenger in the car. So I know one of the things that I saw that you talked about a little bit is forgiveness. And yeah, there's some forgiveness for the person who is driving the car. Unfortunately, the person driving the car when Scott died was his cousin, and he was also killed. But still, there can be anger even at those who are deceased if we allow that to overtake our lives. And I was wondering about you. How have you dealt with Jake's death?
God, how have I dealt with it? A range of emotions, like everybody, when it happened, it's traumatic shock. You can't even believe the words that you just heard over the telephone from the doctor. I don't think I felt anything for months. I felt like I didn't eat, I didn't sleep. I can't remember much about year one, honestly. I'm not sure if that's my brain protecting me or I know my brain's different too. I don't know if you guys experienced that, but my brain is damaged is the best way I can say it. I don't remember things. I can't juggle as many things as I used to be able to juggle at once.
Yeah,
it can get overwhelming if things come in too fast, and obviously there's triggers out there. But year two, it started to get a little better, but then it didn't.
Because they do say the brain's frozen that first year, and then
well, Mom, and not only is the brain frozen, but for me, I was always in two places. I was here present, and I was in, I can't believe my brother died. I was in the accident. I was also in the idea that I'm not going to have him in my life forever. I mean, I was constantly thinking all these things as I was trying to live my life.
Right. I remember thinking the blood vessels in my head were so popped out that I couldn't possibly survive.
Yeah, it felt like the world was moving and you were standing still.
Yeah.
And when you tried to fit in, you were a complete misfit. Like you just didn't understand the trivial that people were complaining about. So it it took a long time, and
Yeah.
it still is, I'm coming up on 4 years, and I don't know why. I guess because of my books coming out, but this week has been really hard. This
Uh-huh.
past
Mm.
Yeah, yeah. Tell us about writing your book.
Well, I didn't start out writing it to be a book. I started writing it just to kind of puke up a lot that I was holding on to and get it out. I was writing a letter to Jake, kind of telling him what's going on and how we're doing or weren't doing. And it was painful, and I would stop and start. And then I realized one day that there was these quotes. I used to write my Jake and Liam these notes on Post-it sticky notes every morning, and there were quotes and truisms and messages, sometimes my own, many times other personalities or known and unknown. And my goal was simple. I started at age 5 with Jake. I wanted him to see a pathway to learn all these positive traits that would make him just help grow his heart, mind, and soul, right? And feed it so that he could develop on his own and figure out what's important, what's not. But I wanted to guide it, right? And so I did that for Jake, and then Liam. And when he died, I started thinking about those for some reason. I'm like, you question everything, right? Your belief system, values. I'm like, do these quotes mean anything? Or how do they even apply to grief?
One of your favorites quotes.
C.S. Lewis, his absence is like the sky, it's spread over everything.
Yeah, yeah, that's for sure.
How did he come up with the name Walk On?
Yeah, so when Jake died, we were getting a bunch of flowers, a lot, too many. And we quickly thought, what would Jake want? And he had belonged to a youth group at his church, and they every summer go out to the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation and help the children out there at a place called Red Shirt Table. And they teach them how to read and life lessons and hang with them and love them. And so we started a scholarship to benefit kids out there. And then 6 months later, we started a second scholarship. We're at the University of South Carolina, where I went, and Jake wanted to follow in my footsteps. And we started that one in partnership with the football team. And it was called the Jake Panus Walk-On Scholarship. Walk-ons are the unrecruited players who are they play in the scout team, they try to earn their way on. And that became a real calling card. We had shirts made, Walk On for Jake, and it just took on a much larger than life meaning. And then coincidentally, we later learned that in Native American lore, when they use the term walk on, they mean when you pass on and go on to the next step in your journey. So it really tied it all together in I didn't know that, a really universe coincident way. And now they're both known as the Jake Panus Walk-On Scholarship. The first one was renamed.
I love that. What a way to celebrate his memory. I wondered, what have you learned that's helped you in your business and sports marketing? I would imagine, I was saying to Heidi, sports is so filled with success and failure.
And metaphors.
And metaphors. Yeah.
That you can use in life, right? And lessons.
Yeah, totally. I mean, you learn so much in sports, and I always encourage my boys to play for that reason, that all the life skills that you learn. Resilience comes to mind, right? Faith, grit, integrity, accountability, all these things had to apply to grief. And I had to find a way to apply them. Some took longer than others. It depends on the day and how you see it, but gratitude was a big one too. Gratitude really, and I'll give you an example. When Jake first died, everyone says a lot of different things to bereaved parents, and somebody said to me, you should just look at it as you were lucky to have him for 16 years. And I just kind of looked at the person and said, and it just didn't land well, but I just thanked them, and I kind of put that away. And then about 2 years later, I was lying on the grass outside on a beautiful sunny day, looking up at the sky, and it did hit me. Like, what if I didn't have Jake in my life?
Right.
And was I better off never having him, or was I better off at least having him for 16? And I looked at it as I was better off for having him for 16, because he taught me so much. and gave me so much in return. So having gratitude.
Stephen,
um,
I think you're making a good point. Sometimes timing is important of when people say what we can hear, and sometimes
Yeah.
we have to put it away. And I always say I'm poor for having lost my brother, but much richer for ever having known him. But this is also why we called this organization the Open to Hope Foundation, because we didn't want to tell people to have hope, because that's, like you said early on, that's very insulting. We just wanted them to be open to the idea that someday they may have hope again. And especially hearing stories like yours, you know.
Yeah, there's no worse feeling, I think, than being hopeless.
Right.
Mhm.
So I wanted to ask you, how's your support been from other men? Because you're kind of in a men's world, the sports world, and I know a lot of men don't get any support. I wondered if you got more from men being in the sports world.
Yes and no. You know, it's such a tricky subject for men that people certainly acknowledge the loss, and maybe that's about as far as they can get. And I understand. And that's one of the reasons I wrote the book, is I really feel like our vulnerability is our strength. And by putting it out there, maybe that will allow other men just to be at least open with their feelings. And because there's nothing wrong with that. I got great support from my therapist, who is a man, and he's been fantastic. And I lean on him as much as therapy, as a friend, and I kind of look at him as a father figure. But I've gotten support from some friends that it means a lot, and they've been there. And from the Coach Beamer at the University of South Carolina, who definitely displays a lot of humanity, and that meant a lot to us and to me as Jake's father.
And how do you see men grieving differently than women?
Well, I think one thing, men need action right away, kind of thing. Most men, not all, right? We're just not going to generalize, but also I think men are just more reluctant to share the deep pain that comes with losing a child. And I even felt it when it first happened. The first week, I just kind of hid behind sunglasses.
Well, Stephen, as a guy and as a sports guy, sometimes you're given messages like "suck it up," "walk it off." I mean, you think about the message on the field: "Big boys don't cry," you know, etc. And so you're kind of, a lot of times, a lot of men are socialized with these messages, right?
100%. And I was like, you got knocked down, get back up again. And I was taught that over and over and over again. But this isn't. I think what I try to tell people is this isn't some wound that I'm going to heal from, right? The time doesn't heal wounds like this. This is a void I'm going to live with the rest of my life, and I accept that. But it doesn't have a finite time period. Oh, I broke my back. The doctor says in 12 weeks I'm going to be back up and running. I'm going to be back up and running, but I might be at a different speed.
I like that.
And I wondered, do you see yourself and your wife grieving differently?
100%. We support each other, and it's difficult at times, honestly, if I'm really candid, because it's the one person you share this tragedy, but we are grieving completely differently. And sometimes it causes a little friction because the other one's doing it differently. They can't go where you're going, or they don't want to hear what you're doing, because it just hurts too much. And we've been like two trains where every once in a while we cross paths and share the track, but most times we've been on different tracks. And it took a little while to adjust to that, because I felt abandonment kind of at first, like, wow, I lost my son, and am I going to lose my wife? Started going through my head, because I think you're also waiting for that next shoe to drop.
Well, it's interesting because my parents grieved very differently also, Stephen. My mother I remember she wanted to bring people in and have them come into the house and support us. And my father wanted privacy. He was more private. So that kind of could create some stress or conflict.
I remember I would be annoyed if I was up, okay, I'm going to get up and I'm going to do it, today. And he was not up. Then I was like come on, get it up. I'm trying to, or he'd be up and ready to do something. And I would like, no. But one of the things I found disturbing, and I find it disturbing even after Scott died 40 years ago, is the fact that there are people who actually believe that you will be divorced, you're at high risk for divorce, and you hear that, and you're not. It's actually in books written, and it's said by therapists. There's absolutely no data to show that you're more risk for divorce. Sure, you're having a tough time, but as you said, you did suffer the same loss, and you're the only ones that suffered that loss. And you are worried about your surviving kids, and on a really intense level. So there are, these commonalities and understanding that you have. I know I wanted to ask you about Liam. What are your thoughts? How is he grieving, and what are your concerns for him? Because I know I had a lot of concerns about, I had 3 daughters at the time. Heather was 14, Heidi was 20, and Rebecca was 19.
Mhm.
Yeah.
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 Well, Liam, I don't know if Heidi can identify with this, but children are the forgotten grievers because their peers really don't want to ask them about it because maybe they're not, especially at Liam's age, he was 11, they're not equipped to talk about this. And then adults are a little fearful of making them sad, So the first year, Liam, I would say, put on a lot of body armor, because I look at it like this: Liam didn't just lose his brother, he lost parts of his mother and his father, like a total trifecta of tragedy.
Right.
And I was struggling. I was 51, and I'm thinking, I'm 51 years old, and I'm really struggling. How is an 11-year-old boy supposed to handle this? And that's one of the things that, when I got to that point, that was one of the things that helped me move forward and take some steps in the right direction, because I realized he needed me more than ever. Year 2, Liam changed schools. We changed schools for him to help him, give him a fresh start. He didn't want to be known as Jake's brother, and Jake left a major footprint in our community. He was everywhere. Everybody knew Jake. And Jake was the extrovert, Liam's the introvert. So those were, that was a lot of big shoe to fill, and Liam didn't want anything to do with it, rightfully so. And he actually went to a school where we found a lot of love and compassion, which was great. And his confidence came back. And now he's back in the public school as a freshman and doing very well. But he's emotionally evolved for his age, but he's also, like any kid, reluctant to talk about it too much because it makes him sad.
That makes sense. So much comes up for me, Stephen, as a sibling, because I was 20, so I wasn't even 11 when my brother died. But my sisters and I knew nobody that had lost brothers or sisters at our age. Nobody. So we felt like our friends really couldn't identify with us. And like you said, you're trying to also kind of be a normal kid. And you don't want to be, oh my gosh, there's that person that lost her brother, So yes, and the focus is often on the parents, and you want to be strong for the parents. I always say to parents, we're trying to be good kids by not grieving in front of you, because we know how much you've been through, and we don't want to cause you any more pain than you already have. So, it can be tricky, especially when everyone's saying, oh my gosh, how are your parents? So, you're constantly talking about your parents, which makes you feel like, do I even have the right to my loss because my parents lost their child?
Right.
So it is very complex. I love that you were able to see what he needed and put him in a different environment. And then now he's back in another, because like he and his brother are different kids.
Yeah,
My brother was the same way. My brother was larger than life. He was actually, I felt like our family hero. He varsitied in 3 sports. He was the quarterback of the football team, the catcher of the baseball team, most valuable player, team captain. It went on and on and on. So, it's like, okay, who are we without him in our lives? And how can we have our own identity? It is a complicated task for sure.
I totally agree with that. Well said.
And I like that you thought about your own health. My mom can talk about this. A few weeks after my brother died, she was worried about her own health. And she's like, I have children. I have to take care of myself. And so she went out to run. And Mom, you can tell the rest of the story. You went out to jog.
Yeah, because I was not a great runner, but I ran. And I remember thinking, I can't do this. And I got my shoes on and went out to run. And I thought, I know all my neighbors are looking out the window right now and saying, oh, she doesn't care about her kid.
She
Look at
didn't
her.
love her son. Yeah.
Yeah. It's
So,
such a bizarre feeling, isn't it? That to feel that.
yeah,
Yeah.
that you
Well,
can't take care of yourself because of judgment. Like,
Yeah.
well, and sometimes you feel like you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. If you
Mhm.
grieve too much, people might get annoyed, but if you don't grieve what they think is enough, they might be annoyed. I mean, it's like, okay, wait a minute. And you feel like people are looking at you. I mean, I don't know if they are or if it's just your perception, but
Yeah,
you do feel like that.
you do. And my wife and I were just talking about how we hate that look. And
Mhm.
I remember I think it was about a month into it, and we had friends visiting, dear friends, and we went out for dinner. It was one of our first times going out in public. And we went out late, and we made sure we got a table in the corner, dark, and someone said something funny. And I remember laughing for the first time. And then I caught myself and looked around like, holy shit, I'm not supposed to be laughing.
but
Right?
wasn't it funny when I remember the first time I laughed too, it was like a tinkle. It was like a bell. It was like, I was alone. I happened to be alone in the house, and my husband picture was in the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times, and he didn't tell me it was going to be there. And I opened it and looked at it. I mean, that's how little communication you're doing about your life. And I looked at it and I started to laugh. It was so weird. It was
Yeah.
like the sound that I hadn't heard. And this was probably 3 months. I wouldn't be surprised if it was that long. Remember, we went to a movie and we went to another town because it was a comedy. It was that movie Tootsie, and it went clear to another town so nobody would see us laugh. You know, it's bizarre.
Yeah. It is bizarre that we think like that and structure our lives, but self-care becomes such a big issue, right? And boundaries, and you can't absorb any more pain. So you're very protective of what you do, where you go, who you
Right.
see.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so Stephen, what has helped you the most?
Uh, Two things, probably my therapist and my optimistic nature,
Uh-huh.
which thank God my parents instilled that in me,
Yeah.
or I was born with that. Either way, I give a lot
Mhm.
of thanks for that.
That resilience piece.
Yeah, look, it hurt badly when this happened and you hit the ground really hard, but I think because of optimism, there's some pliancy in that ground. And so you can spring up, not right away, obviously, but eventually you can
Yep.
find a way to crawl, and 1 hour at a time, one day at a time. And that's really how I approached it, because I knew it was a battle and I was watching my wife suffer, and that's very painful for her husband to watch. Like my wife, Kelly, she has not read my book. Um, she probably won't anytime soon, and that's fine. She just doesn't want to go anywhere near it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and I think you're also talking about the how beneficial your therapist has been. And I think for anyone out there that, I'm in private practice as a therapist, goodness of fit is everything. And it sounds like you found someone that was a really good fit for you.
Yeah, we actually share him. We did. His name's Mitch Davidowitz. He's based out of Boston, and he's done grief for over 40 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
And he's just we had some things in common. We were introduced to him through a mutual friend of my wife's, and we knew right away within 15 seconds in talking to him, this was the guy. He studied Buddhism. We've read a lot about it and semi-studied it, and certainly subscribed to a lot of the principles. So we had that in common, the Boston thing. And it's just like you said, it's just been a perfect fit. And I'm giving a lot of thanks for that. He's been there for me. I talked to him this morning, in fact, emergency session.
I love it. I love it. See, that's a good therapist. He's there for you when you need him.
Yeah. And sometimes it's 5 minutes, sometimes it's 40. It's just what you need in that
Well, it's
moment.
kind of like a grief coach in a way.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
love it. Well, you were asking before the show, it's been 40 years for us this year since Scott died, and you were asking me how is it after 40 years? And I just want to say to people who are listening, looking at that difference, Heidi said it beautifully, and I'd like her to say what she said, but I'll say what I said. I said that, I know my husband passed away almost 4 years ago. And after his death, I knew two things that I didn't know when my son died. I knew I'd live, and I knew I'd be happy again. And
Mhm.
that truly, I have found it over time, and I believe it's a wonderful world and a wonderful life. Heidi, do you want to say what you said about it? Because I thought it was well said.
Well, I guess the two things I would say to people that are not as far down the road as I am is that I can't believe how important my brother still is in my life in positive ways, and how much he's still with me and I still think about him and he guides me in so many ways. And the other thing is that I rebound much faster. If something happens, if I hear a song that reminds me of my brother, or if I see the New York Jets game or whatever it is, his favorite team, you know, I might be sad for a minute, but I can rebound. It doesn't wreck my entire day, or it doesn't even wreck an hour of it. I just say, thank you, Scott. I'm remembering you. And I might even cry for a minute. I'm able to move forward pretty quickly. And that's different than it was early on.
Yeah.
It's kind of a beautiful thing. We never want to forget them, and you don't.
No, you don't.
You never
Uh,
forget.
It's impossible. Yeah.
And a lot of decisions I've made in my life, I reflect back on now and say, wow, this is because I had a brother that died. And had a brother. I mean, I had a child and I couldn't have another one. And I flew to China and adopted a daughter to give my son a sibling. And had I not had a brother, I might not have two children right now.
Yeah.
I mean,
That's
those kind of
awesome.
decisions in life, so your entire life is going to be impacted forever and in pretty profound ways.
Most
Yeah.
definitely. That's a great story about going to China to get.
My sister and I flew there together, Stephen, and we gave our sons sisters. So the sibling bond for us was important. So Stephen, what advice do you have out there for people that don't know how they're going to survive right now?
I think we've talked about some of it, which is lean on your faith, whatever that is. Know that there will be hope. It's coming there, and there is hope. Practice self-care. Really take care of yourself. Establish boundaries that you're comfortable with, and be easy on yourself. That's one of the main ones. I mean, we were talking about earlier with judgment and shame and whatnot. Just lose all that and just be really easy on yourself, because it takes a while to emerge from such traumatic news, and that's okay. And everyone's timeline is different, but just be gentle on yourself and lean on all the answers are inside, right? The resilience is in you, the grit, the grace, it's all there. They just have to mine it. And again, on their timeline.
I love it. Well, thank you so much. And tell us where we can get your book.
So it's available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, and 30,000 other booksellers. So it's online waiting for you.
Okay, called Walk On.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephen, so much for being on.
Yes, Stephen, thank you so much. And I love the book Walk On, and that it was selected by the GMA Good Morning America Book Club. Please go get this book. If you don't know how you're gonna, walk on, get the book and see what's helped Stephen. So thank you so much, Stephen. This has been a great show, and thank you for everything you're doing for so many out there.
Right back at you, Heidi and Gloria. You guys are doing great work. Keep it up, and God bless you.
Thank you. And thanks everybody for joining on this show today. Heidi and I and all of our team at Open to Hope always want to remind you that if you've lost hope, please lean on our hope until you find your own, and God bless.
I'm Dr. Heidi Horsley. You have been listening to Open to Hope, the podcast. You can follow Open to Hope on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. To learn more, visit us at opentohope.com and go to Apple Podcasts to subscribe.
I'm Dr. Gloria Horsley. Join us again next week for another Open to Hope conversation, where we invite you to lean on our hope until you find your own.